he insisted on having the right to walk through the East End, and they were intent on that he wouldn't. And our job was originally was to keep the two sides apart and prevent a street battle.
Did you see any of the trouble in Cable Street?
I was mixed up in it.
What exactly happened?
Well, everything was coming at us whenever they found
These are the communists?
Well, to seem to me that even the fascists joined in. It looked to me that we were getting it from everybody, both sides. And everything was being thrown at us. Stones, railing tops, bricks, half bricks, bottles, tin cans, the lot, pieces of wood.
So was it really everybody against the police rather than communists against Mosley?
Finally, yes. Because both of them, I assumed from their behaviour that they both resented that we were stopping them. And I have heard since that apparently they passed remarks that we were out to protect the fascists, which was a load of rubbish. We were out there to protect peace and law and order. Nothing. We hadn't, as a police force, did not have an axe to grind in favour or against either sides.
And do you get the impression that both sides wanted trouble?
Well, it's difficult to say whether they wanted trouble or not, but it was obvious that both had set out with the intention of doing what they wanted to do. And that was the fascists, the Mosleyites, the black shirts, were intent that they were going to have their right, which one says if it's going to be peaceful, is to march in demonstration through the East End. And the opposition, which was, I would have assumed, was largely communist-inspired after all this time. I mean, one's memory is a little bit vague in the general sense, but that is the impression we all got, that it was largely communist-inspired, and that they were intent that Mosley would not walk through the East End. And our job, in a sense, because we were keeping both sides apart and saying that neither was going to impose their right by force of arms, shall we say, then it seemed that in the finish we were the target of both sides.
What was the reaction of you and your colleagues to coming under this hail of stones and bricks and tin cans?
Well, we just had to stand and take it until we were given the order. And that was, I understand that people say that the Riot Act was not read. Well, I don't know what the Riot Act says, but something was read. And a time limit was given for them, everybody, to clear the streets. And I can't remember now whether it was 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but it was one of the two. And at the end of that, we got our orders to clear the streets. And that's when the real battle began. As far as we were concerned, I mean, it was our job to clear the streets, and they didn't intend to clear until they were made to. And so it turned into a battle.
How did you clear the streets?
By ordering them to clear, and if they didn't and they resented, then we went for them. Lots were arrested, and lots were the truncheons had to be used to protect ourselves, and a lot of people were injured in that respect. Quite honestly, it was a not exactly a bloodbath, but there was a lot of blood and a lot of injury on the police. And naturally, there comes a limit to which you're going to stand that sort of thing, and especially as if they are in contravention of the law.
Was that the first time you'd used your truncheon in a situation like that?
I can't remember using my truncheon on any other occasion in my service.
How did you feel about that afterwards? Did you feel angry, or did you feel a little reluctant that you'd had to use a truncheon, or sad because obviously it had been rather violent and extremely unpleasant?
My reaction, and I was only a young policeman really in service then, because I had only been in the job exactly 4 years, and my resentment was against the fact that a mob were going to try and take over and do as they liked, irrespective of what the law said or what the authority said. And today I still take that view, that no one should be allowed to be above the law, and everybody should be made to obey the law. And I consider that the people of this country are very lucky insofar that they have so reasonable a police force en masse. And I have travelled a fair bit of the world, and in being completely honest, I don't know a police force in the world that is more fair or more just.
Were you stationed locally at the time?
No, I was stationed at Kentish Town.
And were most of the police officers from other parts of London?
Definitely. From all over the MPD.
Now, Mosley didn't in the end march through the East End. His march was diverted through, if I remember right, through the city. Why do you think the decision was made to prevent Mosley marching through the East End?
Purely for the principle of trying to preserve law and order and to prevent what is obviously going to be a battle, if both sides insisted.
You think the decision was correct?
Definitely.
Of course, the communists presented this as a victory for them. Mosley had been stopped from marching through the East End. Would you see it like that?
Well, he partly marched through the East End. He was in the East End. Cable Street is in the East End. He certainly didn't didn't get doing all he wanted to do. But from my knowledge of the powers, you have no power to stop a person until danger is threatened. And I would assume that the powers that be, that commissioner downwards, thought that it could be contained. And certainly it is an accepted fact, and it's laid down in regulations, that the commissioner can ban or can redirect any procession on the public streets. And therefore, he did this. I should think, I assume as an ordinary policeman, that this was done so as not to just ban it completely, but to try and avoid trouble on the streets.
Did you see Mosley himself in Cable Street?
I cannot remember having seen him.
But
No.
you saw plenty of his supporters around?
Well, his supporters mixed up, yes.
Can you explain why it was that Cable Street became the focus of the day's events? Because the big demonstration was in Gardener's Corner, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't a demonstration at a fixed point. I understood it. I cannot tell you because I wasn't at Gardener's Corner. We went straight to that area of the East End, and we were on the streets in and around Cable Street. But I understood it was a march and not a fixed demonstration at a fixed spot. No doubt Gardener's Corner was mixed up in it, I would think, because it's roughly in that area of London. But the streets were black with people. Black, solid. Cable Street itself was solid, apart from the place that we cleared eventually. And do you know the area? You do. Well, you know where the railway goes over the road and it's supported by a darn great round stanchion. Well, now that area was kept clear for various reasons. And apart from that, as I say, within 30 yards, 40 yards of that, I believe from memory, there's about 5 roads come into that part, in and out. And apart from that part, as far as I could see in every way in which from memory, every way we looked, there was people, solid.
Why didn't you try and clear Commercial Road, which is a wider road than Cable Street?
I thought I wouldn't know because I wasn't there. And after all, I'm only a PC doing as I told. I've had no point of decision. I mean, as a PC, PCs didn't come and make the decision. The decision is made by the top brass. So, I mean, I cannot answer that question, why, but certainly the whole, as far as I know, the whole of the East End was cleared of mobs and crowds and restored to reasonable normality before we withdrew.
Looking back, and after 50 years, are there any incidents, any particular anecdotes that arise from the day that are clear in your mind? Any pictures, any impressions?
Well, impressions that we were just going to be kicked out of the way.
And this, of course, must have come as a bit of a shock, because there wasn't any particular tradition at that time, and that has built up since, you might say, in recent years, of violence against the police on this scale, was there?
No, I don't remember any before that. There was one instance in which afterwards, I think it was afterwards, and that was in Camden Town over the communist and black shirts, when there was a little bit of a argy-bargy and a bit of physical attack on us. But that is the only instance in which I can remember such a threatening situation. I was on the conga marches in 32-33, and I would have said that on occasions there were more people on the streets then than there was in Cable Street, probably in procession. But as far as hunger marches are concerned, I've never known one to cause trouble. There was plenty of trouble on occasions, but that was stirred up by known communists.
In your years in London, policing in London, would you say the communists gave you more trouble or the black shirts?
As far as the police are concerned, I would say there's more trouble and more background viciousness lodged directed towards the police from the communists and the fascists. By and large, I think Mosley tried to create a good image. But then I classify Mosley as a small Hitler. That's my opinion of him. And I only saw 6 days of Nazi Germany in the 1936 at the Olympic Games, and I didn't like what I saw, and I was only a young person without a lot of political ideas at all then. Politics to me was something that you didn't have to worry about. I was more interested in enjoying my life and enjoying athletics. But I was shook rigid with what I saw in Berlin in my 6 days in Berlin for the Olympic Games.
So you could understand how the Jewish community in the East End felt when they heard that black shirts were going to march along the end of the street, that they were scared?
Well, I don't know about being scared. I would have thought their reaction was that they would try and prevent him getting the ascendancy that Hitler got in Germany. I wouldn't think it was entirely fear at that moment. It was fear of what might develop over years. I mean, Hitler didn't come to power in a twinkling of an eye. It took him, about 2 years, didn't it, from memory? 18 months to 2 years before he got enough power to really go. And I think that this, and I don't think that it was entirely, I would have thought from memory that it wasn't just the Jewish people and it wasn't just the communists. I thought the average decent people had no time for black shirts. That is my lasting impression of those years, that the ordinary people did not want a Nazi type of party operating in this country.
That's lovely, that's fine for me.